A longtime player agent joins us every Wednesday on the Business of Sport. Ritch Winter. Ritch, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Feeling like a really short time sports agent with a lot of energy. So I'm kind of concerned about the long time agent, but I'm feeling good.
Feeling good. Well, that's great. Well, today, a very interesting topic that we're going to get into. We're going to kind of call it the future of sports segments, and to kind of line it up, and this has to do with AI and how maybe they're going to use it, and LLM, the large language model, LQM, the large quantitative model, and then of course AQ. Let's start. Most people know what AI is for the most part, but what about AQ? What is AQ?
Yeah, most people in hockey, I think, believe artificial intelligence is the intelligence of the general manager that didn't get him in the playoffs. But it's a little more complicated than that. But so AQ is it's basically a combination of artificial intelligence and quantum mechanics. And really, what it is because what happened, just to use a quick example, quantum sensors measure the magnetic field around everything on the planet. Everything emits a magnetic field. So when they use it to measure your heart and look for plaque in your heart, the difference between a quantum sensor is that it's so sensitive that it can detect a piece of plaque in an artery the size of a smaller than a head of a pin. Really important, because we all know a lot of guys who had electrocardiograms and then died 2 weeks later running a marathon because the old style technology wouldn't catch that plaque. Right. The problem with the sensors when they tested them at the University of San Francisco Hospital is they were so sensitive, they're picking up the magnetic field from the elevator, from the guy's cell phones, from the guy's radio on the second floor. So they had to use artificial intelligence, which developed algorithms to listen for the knowledge and allow the sensors to just filter and hear get the magnetic fields they were getting from the heart. So very important, because these sensors, from a hockey perspective, can predict injuries at a molecular level. Because before you get a injury or a concussion that's a result of a series of hits and a progressive problem,
yes,
something happens at the cellular level in your hamstring, in your groin, or in your brain before it becomes a concussion event in the case of a brain. So AQ we would be able to put sensors in the helmets that would measure those small impacts when you get that would maybe require 100 of them for you to get CTE. We'll be able to measure them and then send signals to the medical staff to alert you to the seriousness of the problem and the magnitude. So Jack Hidari at Sandbox AQ, who developed a lot of this technology while at Google and spun it off into a new company, would be able to use sensors to identify concussions. Also, instead of trainers will be able to use the sensors to just take a look at a groin or take a look at a hip and measure guys constantly and catch them before they have an injury. Not a small thing when you have a salary cap. If you can reduce the games lost to injury by 20%, 30%, 50%,
right,
important. But more importantly, if we can protect these young men from having CTE and ruining the rest of their life because we didn't have enough data to protect them, that's tough. And of course, traumatic injury, can't stop that. That catastrophic, hit into the post or the broken leg. But we can probably predict somewhere between 60 and 80% of the injuries that occur in the National Hockey League before they occur. It's incredible. So that's the kind of thing that adopting these technologies will do for a team. You won't lose Kaner, Evander Kane for the whole season. Maybe you can predict that. But you could maybe avoid, 200-300 games lost to injury that might allow you to spend enough at the trade deadline that picks up a couple better players you got.
So could this help out? Because I know, definitely for a lot of concussions, and we've had concussion doctor experts on, and they talk about how it's the repetitions, the little ones, and that they lead to a big one. Could that be the same? Now I know it's very different, but we're talking like a knee injury, right? And now sometimes you just have guys come across the middle, they collide knees and the ACL gets ripped, right? That's a catastrophic one. You can't predict it. But would these sensors be able to tell if your shoulder's starting to get worn down before it completely goes and you could stop it there? Or, would it work for those type of, injuries as well?
It'll be better than an MRI. because it's looking at a molecular level. MRI is still measuring something using a different scanning technology. They're looking at it, but they're not getting to the molecular level. Like what quantum means is at the lowest common denominator. So it's looking at it at a molecular level.
Right.
So, and what, when it comes to medicine and other things, they're, for example, very close to see what happens. Cancer, for example, happens at the cellular level. What happens is cells start replicating, as we know, quicker and quicker and quicker, and that's cancer. And once you are able to get at the cellular level and learn to what they call fold a protein and insert it into a cell, you can actually turn that cell off and prevent it from replicating. So they're going to be able to do things at such a small level that's almost incomprehensible to us to understand. They'll be able to identify some change in the fluid levels, the molecular structure in the ACL joint or whatever it is, right? Before, way earlier. Will you prevent them completely? Maybe, maybe not, but you're going to get a lot of information a lot earlier. And that's critical. And the concussion thing is, having seen so many guys suffer from CTE symptoms, that other side of this, AQ also is able to, what they do is they take, it's hard for people to capture, but there's so much information that they can manage. They can look at and say, we're looking to develop a new material that will be 45 to 500 to 600 times stronger than the material that Bauer, say, for example, or CCM is using in their helmets. But we want to make it also 50% lighter. Now, AQ is able to take all of the molecular structures in every single material on the planet and start filtering them to test what new material would create that product, what new construct of molecules, atoms, and others will create that product. Now, it's not that complicated. It's basically like it's cooking, right? They're cooking at high speed and figuring out when this thing comes out of the oven, oh my gosh, it's like 5 times as heavy or 5 times as light and 40 times stronger. So at this, you want to attack both, protect the players to the extent you can protect them, try and measure the injury before it happens. And then beyond that, live with the rest of the consequences that you can't fix. Maybe, to your point, Jason, the rest of the problems are fixed by calling a penalty.
Well, yeah. Dare to dream on actually using the rule book, Rich. Let's not go crazy today.
I try and explain to the police officer who stops me, this is a hockey country. It's playoff time. I know I was going 110 and a 50, but it's playoff time, man.
Yeah. I
haven't sold that one yet.
No. Rich Winter joined. So, Rich, when we talk about this, how close are teams to implementing this, do you feel? And any idea on what cost would be to the teams to do it?
The costs are going to be determined on the goals that they would set for certain material evaluation and things. A lot of the material evaluation has already been done by Sandpoint AQ for the U.S. Army. But to suggest an NHL team is close to doing this is, they're no closer than having their general manager do open heart surgery than they are to this. They are so far off the radar. They are so far behind the curve of what's happening in the world. It's unimaginable, but that's the great opportunity. The team that actually jumps into this, it's like actually, oh gosh, we're going to have like 6 extra forwards on the ice with, and those guys are only going to have we'll have 11. They'll have 5 or 5 players. It's like, it's such an advance, but it takes hockey a long time to innovate because unlike other businesses, they have for years licensed the logo, licensed the broadcast. They're not in the business of investing. Teams like the Los Angeles Dodgers say, no, we're interested. They have their own innovation hub called Elysian Park Ventures. And why is that important to hockey? Well, their Elysian Park Ventures watched what was going on in women's hockey and the mess that it was and said, hey, let's just use our innovation hub. We'll tee it up with Billie Jean King's innovation hub, which we've helped her start, and we'll start the league in 6 months. We could have been waiting for 15 years for that mess to get figured out until someone that approaches things innovatively with the right team and thinks strategically and differently makes it happen. And that's where change has come in sports. There's been virtually no innovation in sports outside the innovation provided to them that they could license their logos or their or player name, image, and likenesses to, except when they start a new league. 3-point play didn't come from the NBA, came from the ABA. A lot of changes in football didn't come from the NFL. They come from the AFL because what happens is those people are innovators, or they wouldn't be starting a new league. So the quickest way to get innovation in hockey would be to start a new league. That's probably not happening, although it would be a very good idea. But that's a real problem. We have a monopoly run by labor lawyers. When I asked Henry Chesbrough, one of the leaders of innovation at Berkeley a while back, who grew up in Canada, I asked him what he thought of using his innovative funnel to create innovative change for hockey. So he said, "You're asking me to help you with innovating amongst a group in a business that is a monopoly run by labor lawyers." Yeah, we could probably help you there, right? It's crazy. Like Henry Chesbrough was called on by Apple, Microsoft, Google, and all of them to help with their innovative efforts. What could they do in hockey? It's mind-boggling. Like there's just so much that we could do to bring fans closer to the game, to protect the players, and really create a game that has more impact on Canada at multiple levels. And we're just so far above that because we're dealing with a monopoly. Isn't it? It's kind of bizarre when you think about it. Every other big monopoly in the world is broken up by antitrust laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't break up sports because there's a labor exemption. When it's collectively bargained, they can have a monopoly. But if a monopoly is not good, generally, it's not good if you can create one and protect it through a collective bargaining agreement. It's just that we'll never see innovation that comes out of sports. Believe me, the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, they're a long ways away from helping get the next group of astronauts out of space.
Yeah, well, you look at now, you mentioned the Dodgers. So you think it's safe to say that baseball has the best, like the NFL teams seem to have more money than anybody. You'd think the NFL would be the leaders of this.
Monopoly run by labor lawyers, but keep in mind there are teams and exceptions to it. Manchester City, FC Barcelona. I think the most progressive sports from an innovative perspective would be Australian rules football and European soccer. Australia, for the most part, is because that small island wanted to be competitive in sports. They felt it was the best way to sell their culture and their way of life. They invested tons of money at the Olympic level, developing athletes, and all of that innovation is, sort of hydrated itself through other sports in Australia. They do extremely well in the Olympics, right? Per capita, they kill it. It's only because of science and the application of science to creating athletes, protecting them, enhancing their performance without drugs, the Russian way. And so it's interesting, the Philadelphia Flyers just hired a sports scientist from the Australian Rules Football League. That's where the brain power is, because the countries have developed the resources to after them. NHL teams won't. And then we've talked a little bit about broadcast technology in the past. Yeah. Well, broadcast could very quickly create a product that would allow a fan to feel like he was right in the game. It would be mind-boggling. And you and I've talked about it. I talked to Colin Wilson, the producer of Avatar, who's a friend of mine, about that. It's not hard. The guys produce movies all the time with that type of action in a movie, not on. Right. But the problem is they're licensors. So what happens is they license their broadcast rights in a very competitive market to Rogers or Bell or whoever it is. Then the company that bought the rights can't make the economics work and invest more money because they're already underwater. They paid too much for the rights. So there's just some systematic issues that prevent innovation from happening until a sport in North America wakes up and starts thinking like Australian rules football or by the Australian Olympic Committee. They're not there. But what's interesting, the Elysian Park Ventures has, it's approaching the value of the Dodgers themselves. They've invested early in DraftKings. They've created all kinds of unique products. And of course, what happens, it's a unique way to use your logo. Because when you announce the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid, let's say, have an innovation hub, kids will come from all over the world. And back to Henry Chesbrough, in the old days, innovation was the guy on the second floor with a vial of this and a vial of that. There was no collaboration globally. What Henry just developed is a strategy that most innovative companies, tech companies, they go looking for massive amounts of information. So they go out and say, hey, the Dodgers have an innovation hub. Well, let's say we said hockey has an innovation hub, the Oilers, the league, whoever it is. Well, you know where the biggest market for one of the biggest tech markets in the world is in an area where they have the largest audience following hockey in anywhere in the world per capita. And no one thinks of that because it's not ice hockey they watch field hockey. India and Pakistan have 2 billion people watch hockey every year.
Right.
Well, you have Henry's open innovation model and you put all of this out and you create credits and opportunities for prizes. You're going to get a kid from Mumbai who played hockey, field hockey for 10 or 12 years at the Mumbai Academy or whatever they call it over there going, hey, I read about this thing because I went over to watch some hockey in Canada with my cousin who lives over there. They put out this thing and he's going to send an idea. And keep in mind, as crazy as this sounds, every single major innovation in the world was nuts crazy before it became the iPhone, right? It was nuts crazy before it became OpenAI. Crazy people or creating the opportunity to connect with crazy people with crazy ideas is the solution. Now, where this gets very exciting is if an NHL team was to do this, you create platforms that can be licensed. Now you're not licensing your logo. That's not what the Dodgers are doing anymore. They're certainly doing that, but they're now licensing all of technology and they're selling these startups for 4, 5, 10 times what they bought. They now have enough revenue to look at it because they have a little more flexible. They'll be able to outspend everybody for the next 20 years and still be massively profitable because they haven't looked at this myopically as a sports team. A sports team has data. A sports team has intellectual property, and the smart companies in various businesses are learning to license it. It's hard to believe that Taylor Swift might generate half of what the NHL does this year. And when you put it in that context, you think maybe Leon, Zach Hyman, and Connor McDavid might be able to figure out something with some tech people, create an avatar, do some things that might generate some serious revenue. It's all there to be had, but it's probably going to take North American franchises a lot longer than most to figure it out.
Ritch Winter joins us on the Business of Sport. We're talking about the future of sport. We talked a little bit about AQ. We'll get into more of that when we return, about the sensors, how it works in training, and much, much more when we return to the Gregor Show presented by Play Alberta. The Business of Sport on Sports 1440, Oilers Nation, YouTube, Facebook, and X. Jason Gregor, Ritch Winter with us, and we're talking about the future. We've been talking about AQ, and Ritch, would that be something that you could use a lot of then just during off-season training for athletes? Because we see a lot of guys. Lately, for a while there was one guy getting his Achilles ripped in August almost on a yearly basis just during training. Is that something that so the teams will they invest to have it on the players during the year? You could have would it be even more beneficial to have it during training where they're training way harder during the off season?
Well, let's not get any illusions that the teams are actually going to spend money on this because it's interesting to watch an NHL team. They have to pay, have to spend on salary. So they throw that, we're in negotiations all the time saying, come on, it's just split the difference. It's $100,000. And then you try and talk to them about a new idea that they could sell in the arena and they're throwing nickels around like they're manhole covers. So I wouldn't have any illusion that they'll actually invest on this stuff and be early adopters by any means. Sports teams aren't. But what it can do, what AQ can do is start looking at load management, making sure particulars. We're all different, right? Like the thing that might affect an Achilles tendon on player A might have no impact on player B. What's going on in Connor McDavid's body that allows him to do that, and how do we can look at either the molecular level or slightly above that to find ways that we could train players. I found it interesting the other day when I did a little search. I think we talked about this briefly before of how Phil Jackson's, because I have this theory. Hockey, smaller surface, same game than soccer. Basketball, similar game as hockey on a smaller surface, but the smallest surface has the biggest players. So they've learned to move in their offenses in ways that require them to be constantly in motion, because if they're not in motion, they're never getting the ball. So not only did I ask the artificial intelligence device or the programs that I use, I didn't only ask about how the triangle offense could be used to break down the power play, because it's fascinating how it could. I asked him how it would develop players. And because of the nature of the movement within Phil Jackson's triangle offense, the AI program could create a spatial awareness of what's going on. I can't tell you, like our guys that do the video analytics, like I'm not that an expert at when it comes to understanding the game itself. But So they're looking at a particular defenseman who plays on an Alberta-based team, who's a pretty good player, more defensive. And it was just shocking to me see the little subtle things that they're seeing that AI could see instantly and report to a coach or a trainer or anybody involved in a practice, instantly what they're doing. So this particular player just shot a puck around and did a rim at the blue line. But they said, look, here, Bob, is your problem. See, look, you didn't scan, right? And then they showed him a clip of Cale Makar. What does Cale Makar's head do before he makes a move compared to what this player does before he makes a move? They don't understand their options. They don't know how to see the game. And if you can showing them that,
right,
then you can start. And then the other thing, like preventing injuries, you can look at the stick and the posture, because a lot of problems with the stick. If it's too long, you go into the wall, you make slight subtle adjustments to get the puck off the wall. And by the time you readjust into a position to pass effectively, you may have lost the opportunity to make a play at the NHL. The length of the stick may determine the difference between an NHL and AHL player, because if you have to make an adjustment because your stick is too long, in the NHL, a high danger scoring opportunity only exists on average for about 3/4 of a second. So if you take half a second to make this move to adjust for your stick, you may never be able to complete plays at the NHL level. Awesome at the American Hockey League level, but unless you understand that the stick is calibrated wrong and you can't measure that, those kind of things are like a huge problem. Everybody talks about millimeters and inches being the difference. It's actually true. Who's measuring them? Some guy that says, I can tell you, I just feel his stick's a bit long.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yes. Well, I've talked with Adam Oates at length.
Oh yeah, he's really good at it. He's a good human. He's a very good human who couldn't stand anywhere near and compete with artificial intelligence.
Yeah. But he's talked a lot about how the importance of a stick and having it fitted properly, and the difference of inch here, inch there, because certain guys how they skate, right? Like if you're more of a hunched over skater, and you talk about how you go into the boards and now you have to adjust yourself. Well, now you're on in the prime position to pass the puck. Boom, you've just lost that opportunity because the window's closed. The game is so fast now, the forechecker's on you. So,
well, and the other thing, Jason, is that stick may cause you to be in the wrong body position. The body's very effective at absorbing force if it's positioned properly, right?
Yes.
Right? Like if you're way out here, your arm's out of control, you get hit, but if you're here, you can. And so understanding that the stick could create injuries and we're not aware of that.
Oh, it makes so much sense. And like I've always argued, how many NHL players who love golf and they golf in the summer, ask them how many of them went for like a real official fitting for their clubs. And, oh yeah, man, I got all my clubs fitted. I'm like, you ever went for a fitting of your stick? Well, no. Right. Wow. And it's mind blowing because it's mind blowing. And there are a few companies that this isn't necessarily AI, but there are companies now, Ritch, that actually do proper fitting for players, but it's maybe 10% of the players in the league?
Well, I would argue that it's not proper fitting. They're doing better fitting, but it's not optimal fitting because they can't see. And what people don't understand is artificial intelligence is just simply a computer program that's able to absorb a lot of trillions and trillions of pieces of data. That data can be video, that data can be text, it can be voice. And it's just hard to comprehend that they can understand molecular structure in sticks. They can understand things visually that we could never see. It's hard to imagine, but it's just something, if applied, would give such a huge competitive advantage. Like and Stan Bowman and I are good friends. We talk about this kind of thing a lot when we get together. He's warm to it, but it's very difficult to get an owner or a president to have the time to really figure out how to do all this. It's very complicated. There are people in the world that can do it very effectively, but every successful organization in the world that is innovating at a high level right now, they have a whole bunch of people like the Oilers do working in their business. Mm-hmm. Then they have a whole other group working on their business. So someone like the coaching group could come and say, well, can you give me a little feedback on how our power play could be adjusted? Because the Oilers power play hasn't been effective last couple of years as it was earlier, because I think they've started to figure out what Connor and Leon are doing, but they're so good at what they do. They're superhuman, those two guys. So how do you think a human on the bench is going to coach them to the next level? They need to see things at a higher level than the two of them see them now. And there's probably no one on the planet that sees it as well as the two of them now. So what are you going to provide them in terms of a resource? How about trillions and trillions of absorbed data from games and their practices and their power play and information how to train in summer and visualize? They need superhuman help, because there isn't a person on the planet right now that can help them elevate their game much beyond what it is. They need that kind of guidance if Connor is to go to a level that is optimal. I don't think he's at an optimal level. He's at a really awesome level, but that's like comparing the Bentley of 5 years ago to the new 600 horsepower Land Rover Defender. Like, things change, and you got to keep up on it. And athletes, they're not keeping up. Lots of changes, personal coaches and stuff. We've made changes, but you want to get ahead of this game. There's lots more out there if you're smart enough to go look for it.
Now, what about, as simply, we talked about this, we've talked about preventing, injuries and when they know it, but what about, like, you talk about the material in the helmets, right? And, more protective material. Has that, are we even close to where it should be on that? Can it be way better, or is it pretty good? Where does it come out?
Oh, it's probably near the Stone Age level in terms of hockey. But when you look at the American Army and what AQ is doing for them, what AQ is able to do, it takes all the data, all the molecular structures of every single material in the planet, everything. And then it starts combining the different molecules in just doing some modeling, and then that modeling they can predict that if you add 2 hydrogens and 6 potassiums or whatever the heck it is, you're going to get stronger and lighter. And they're going to, but they're doing this at trillions of calculations a second. Like, if you were to watch The Imitation Game, if you've seen that movie. Nice. That's a movie about the first computer, actually the second computer, because the first computer was actually created by the Germans and Hitler didn't think it made any sense. So Alan Turing created the first computer at that time. It did 0.007 calculations per second. They were jacked. Now the calculations that NVIDIA's new chips are doing are at over 1 trillion calculations a second. And it's something like many, many quadrillions times more than was the case. It's kind of hard to imagine someone doing, or something doing trillions of calculations a second to then advise you, hey, Jason, I came up with an idea. The computer says to you, I think you need to use these 4 elements, combine them in these amounts, and you're going to get exactly what you want. Thank you, Jason, for making the call. If you need anything else, I will be available at a push of a button. Thank you, Hal. And that's just what's happening now. And we're using look at the sticks alone. I want AI to analyze my player sticks. I don't like them snapping midstream on a really choice opportunity.
Unbelievable how often that happens.
Who's going to be first? The problem for the rest of the league, in whatever league, with whoever goes first, this train is leaving the station at the speed of light, not the speed of a Japanese bullet train. And if you get on first, it'll be impossible to catch up, because some of the people that are developing these things are some of the top scientists in the world, who happen to be sports fans. Not shocking. That they're sports fans. I remember the first time I called Rudy Giuliani, when he was actually Rudy Giuliani, the mayor, not the crazy man that he is now. And he phoned me back in 15 minutes to see what I wanted. And I was like totally shocked, because, hey, Rich, how's the Dominator? What's going on, man? Like, he played great here a couple of nights ago. I was at the game. You forget that some of the leading scientists, Henry Chesbrough, some of the leading innovators, technology folks, Salim Ismail, who works with Peter Diamandis, who's actually got the guy who got Elon into the space race. He grew up in Canada, loves the game. I'd like to get his brain working on some of the stuff, but teams won't find them. They found some analytics guys that used to have blogs, and that's big progress for them. And it probably is some progress, but it's not progress.
Ritch Winter joins us now. What about the NHLPA? We had Marty Walsh on the show last week and talked to Marty about like his vision moving forward. So if the NHL won't do it, Ritch, and you work directly with the players, could the NHLPA do it?
They could develop an innovation hub. I've had some brief discussions with Marty about it. One of the challenges I think they face right now is, they're in collective bargaining. So it's back to that working in your business and working on your business. Marty's got an awful lot on his plate, being a partner in a new Four Nations tournament, working on collective bargaining. I mean, I think some of the bigger issues that he has to solve right now that are primary is working on a strategy to generate enough money or negotiate with the league effectively enough to have some medical benefits for players when they retire. Since we don't have any of that AI, we don't have protective equipment at the level we could. It's sad to think that these players are leaving the game without any form of benefits. And I think those are the kind of things that have been so neglected by absolutely brutally run NHLPA organizations over the years that, I think he's focused on those things. Marty's an interesting guy because, not only is he an alcoholic, which he advertises quite openly, a recovering alcoholic who's done phenomenally well as the mayor of Boston and the secretary of labor, but he also had cancer as a young man. And those kinds of traumas has given him a perspective that I think will make him a great union leader, because players have problems. It's a tough sport, mentally challenging. We talked with Slater Cuckoo about anxiety and these things. I think Marty is a guy that is going to be able to understand players and help them more effectively. But whether he gets to innovation on, he's probably now at about day 400, whether he gets it today, gets on it to day 600 or day 1,000, it's going to depend an awful lot on how he manages what's on his plate now, which is also important.
And so you look at it, because we have a lot of people texting, like, how easy would it be, like, if you got to be the commissioner of the NHL for a day, like, how easy would, like, to start a hub? What type of investment are you looking at? Like, you've got all these billionaire owners who are all claiming that they're making more money all the time. What would be a basis point to get this type of hub up and running?
Well, FC Barcelona, Manchester City, and the Los Angeles Dodgers started their innovation hub with about $1 million to start.
Okay, so it's not a huge investment, like $1 million. You kidding me?
Oh no, Jason, it's huge, because remember the Nickels, they're like away from the ice. I mean, it might be as much as a fourth line winger. That's a lot to spend on changing the world. It's just, that's not what they do. It isn't expensive. It really isn't expensive. Like Colin Wilson, when he explained to me how he would put the 50, 60 cameras into the rink to give us that feel of an action adventure movie and put us right in the game. He said, cameras pretty cheap nowadays. Think about your cell phone. We have HD cameras in our cell phone. It's the algorithms to run the cameras so it's just not a mess, on our digital screen. Same thing. He said about $1 million to a rink.
$1 million to a rink. So in theory, could one team do it and then have their regional rights? So maybe not every game would be on, but their regional rights. Is it possible to do it for one, or does it have to be collective across the board on all the time?
Well, no, you could. I mean, somebody's going to have to test it. I mean, they built the iPhone in somebody's garage, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, you can say, you know what, I'm interested in doing something a little different.
Right.
So I'm going to hire James Cameron, Colin Wilson, whoever it is. I'm going to put something together. Guillermo del Toro's a big sports fan. And they're all excited. Like, it's hard to imagine you can get to some of the most successful people in the world because you represent a player, or because you're a coach, or because you own a team. Like, they're all fascinated by that. So who could you interest? Like, one of my good friends, Alex McDowell, is a production designer on 6 Steven Spielberg films. He built the production design for the movie Minority Report. You go watch that. Fans out there, go watch Minority Report. That movie is 21 years old. And because Steven went to Alex and said, build me a realistic future. No science fiction. Just do everything. Do the research. I don't care what it costs. Build me a realistic future. And off of that movie, 100 patents were filed. 100 patents, because once people saw it, they went, geez, I think Jason, our company could build that. And so it's trying to figure out what the future looks like and then create it. And we're just, I mean, Major League Baseball, NHL teams are far from that. Soccer teams are starting to see it. I mean, and there's even AI that can be used. Like, very few. I mentioned the triangle offense, but you know what? How can we employ? I mean, the most important people. If I was involved in developing an innovation hub for hockey, the first people from a sporting perspective I would hire would be Phil Jackson, Tom Brady, Steph Curry, and Lionel Messi. Or probably Pep Guardiola, because there are things that they're doing in soccer to defend and attack effectively that are very effective on that big surface, which if emulated on a smaller surface could be killer.
Right.
And what is that quarterback seeing that the defenseman I told you about that wasn't scanning properly is seeing when he's calling an audible at the line of scrimmage? Well, the game's different, but he's visualizing things and looking for patterns. How can AI help Evan Bouchard see what's in front of him as effectively as Tom Brady did? Like a lot of people, and all of this we're talking about, it seems massively overwhelming, and it is, unless you have a large language model with all of the information in it, can then tap it by asking the right questions.
Yeah, well, that would be the key for sure. We'll take one final break. I'll come back with more today on the future of sports, on the business of sports, on the Jason Gregor Show, Sports 1440, Oilers Nation, YouTube, Facebook, and X. We return 449. Jason Gregor, Ritch Winter. The business of sport continues on Sports 1440, Oilers Nation, YouTube, Facebook, and X, as always presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Lots more to get to on the innovation when we look at possibly. We talked a lot about AQ. What about the LLM, the large language model, and then the large quantitative model? Are those now the quantitative model, we did more of the predictive medical diagnosis and stuff, but the LLM model, Ritch, how would that be a benefit?
Well, the LLM, not exactly a model. What you have to think of ChatGPT or Grok, Elon Musk artificial intelligence connector, is it connects you to a large language model. So when you connect to ChatGPT, you're essentially, the large language model is everything ever put on the internet. So you have to think of the large language model as like a digital storage system, or the most informed librarian you've ever met in your life. And when you ask ChatGPT for an answer, it is able to source everything that has ever been put on the internet ever. So that's the large language model. Now, the large quantitative model is a little different, and there's some very defined large language models that are a little bit different, because sometimes you just populate with information you want. Let's say you're going to work on the draft and looking at player analysis. You might want to put all your scouting reports, a whole bunch of other things. But can you imagine if you had artificial intelligence could sort what every single person on the internet is saying this year about every single draft pick? And then over the course of 5 years or 6 years, you're going to find out that 56-year-old player that you've hired as be a scout, who sometimes stays for the whole game, sometimes doesn't, he's going to be trumped by an AI process that's going to find all the best advice and analysis of players in the world that's available. And you're going to find there's a guy in Worcester, Massachusetts, that's out predicting projecting the effectiveness or the prospect of an NHL player better than any scout you've ever hired. Now, you don't have to hire that guy. You just keep accessing his blog and looking at his information, using it to push your scouts, go see players. The LA Kings, when they drafted Anze Kopitar because he was in Slovenia, they went to watch him 12 times. No one was going to draft him in the first round from Slovenia because there's no scout on the planet that was going to put their name on the line for that. They got a pretty good player because of that. AI will help you identify those things. So the large language model is just like, Mrs. Schwartz, the old librarian that knows everything ever printed, everything ever put on the internet. That includes research papers, magazines, every blog post. And so the large quantitative model is exactly the same thing. But it's numbers. Right? So you load it with millions of formulas, billions of formulas, so it can be sorted, and they can look at simulations that would put this molecule and this with this one and look at it. And that's how they're going to be discovering medicines soon that will be specific to all of us. Like when you're 90, you're not going to be given medication that's 30% effective that is approved by the Federal Drug Administration. You're going to give it one designed to fit the problem you have at that time. So it's just hard. I'd love to, people. So, there's so much out there, and people are intimidated by artificial intelligence. It's the least technological restriction you should have in your life, because it's built in a fashion that it's communicative. Like when I talk to ChatGPT, I will ask questions about the triangle and model. I'll type it in. Then I'll ask another, fill me in, give me a little bit more. Hey, can you detail what it might do for development? What about younger players versus older players? It's just so simple to use. Like I now create like I'll sit down with my grandchildren like I did last weekend with Tay and Jayla, and I sat down and I said, you want to do a story about your life and your future? So I pumped in a whole bunch of things. Write me 7-chapter book on Tay and Jayla. They live in Edmonton. Their parents' names are this. They have this, da 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 da. And within 2-3 minutes, I have a 7-chapter book. Then I go to a different AI program and say, could you draw me some pictures? Use the particular style that I like. 2 young blonde girls between the ages of 6 and 8, and I just wrote a story about their life. Can you do me 5 or 6 pictures of them growing up at different ages and it creates it for you. But it's so simple to use. People don't understand. Then it's almost like dealing with a child, right? You have a young child that doesn't talk. You have to figure out different ways to talk to them to make sure they understand because they're not yet adopted to language. So the only challenge with AI is learning to what we call prompt it effectively, which is ask the right questions. So you try, it's like the internet. It's really just like the internet. The only difference is it gives you a specific answer. Now, what's even more mind-boggling now, if you look up some of this, they are now Sora, which is a new platform developed by OpenAI. It can actually create a movie. Like Jason, you and I could create a little script about this show, talk about what we're doing, what we do later, and they can create a short motion picture. And the quality is as good as anything you'll see in a cinematic screen. And we're at very close to a time that you and I could build a script of, maybe the Oilers adapting AI and how that affected their future. And we can make a movie of it individually that we could play for our friends. And it would cost us the price of about a $25 a month subscription. What's coming is mind-boggling and fascinating. So I would encourage people to start thinking, get ChatGPT, start playing with it. All you do is type in and say, hey, yesterday I did a scouting report for a player I was going to call for the first time. Give me a scouting report on Jason Gregor. Could you act as if you're a NHL scout, give me his strength, his areas for improvement, and your projection of his trajectory as an NHL player. Now, it's not always right.
No.
But it's amazingly close. So it's just the simplest technology in the world. So if I could give any advice to listeners is load that thing on your phone. Start playing with it. Don't be intimidated by it because it's going to make you the smartest guy at the bar when you're arguing. You go to the bathroom, ask a few questions, come back, you'll blow those guys away. Just get ahead of the game. Don't be the Oilers. Don't be the team that doesn't take on AI. Be the sports fan after a men's hockey league game and blow their mind because you now have at your fingertips through ChatGPT every single thing on the internet and you get an answer specific. You know how we try surfing the internet to get websites? Well, it's like, well, that's not what I wanted. Well, you have to do the same thing with AI and play with it and learn to deal with it. Like if you were to put the internet in front of us like 20 years ago, we'd go like we wouldn't even know what to do with it. Right now we do. And if anybody that's 75, 85 or 95 and looking some way to look at me, I mean, sit down with my grandchildren, I'm creating storybooks for them. It's unbelievable. I actually created one for my grandson. His friend is Jewish, his close friend. So I did a story about them growing up. They both get drafted. They end up playing on different teams. And at the end of their careers, they get traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs, where the young Jewish boy, he gets to play, play with his hero, Zach Hyman. Well, of course, Zach's not in Toronto, and he would be so old he couldn't actually be playing. So it makes little mistakes, but you take that and you tweak it a little bit, and you put in a word perfect, and you put it and you build a nice little thing. Pretty incredible gift for young Levi for his birthday, like unique. It's cool, and there's so much you can do, especially people with time on their hands that are retired. Like, yeah, I do things like give me a Mediterranean recipe, keep the calories at this, and give me 2 or 3, 4 or 5 that can be easily made in 10 to 15 minutes when I get home from the office. Like, it's just a friend, as crazy as it sounds. It's Hal, right? It's Hal from 2001. It doesn't go nuts like Hal did, at least hopefully not right now.
You never know about that. So
that may be next.
Yeah, that may be next. Well, it is fascinating to think. So if you had to predict one NHL team, which NHL team do you think would be the first to adapt this?
You'd have to think it'd be the Washington Capitals because of their owner is, created. It was one of the co-founders of AOL. Most likely, I think Ted's doing some pretty cool stuff. Not all the way, but they bought that old what was that site they just bought? Not Puckpedia, but this precursor. I forget what his name.
Oh yeah, Cap Friendly.
Yeah, they bought that. So I don't know what they're using it for, but it had some value, and so they're doing some different things. Ted's a very bright guy. I would think he's the most likely. Maybe Utah. Their owner made $1 billion in technology off of the work he did. I could see that happening. Chris Armstrong just took over there, a former agent from Wasserman. I've had some discussions with him. He's thinking along those lines at Wasserman. He was exposed to more of that stuff than he'd be exposed at an NHL team. So, yeah, maybe Utah, because I would think a young owner like that looking to improve. Chris is a very bright guy. They'd be right up there in the ones I would guess.
Ritch, great stuff, man. We will chat with you again next Wednesday. Have a great week.
All right, thanks for having me, and I'll talk to you tomorrow about some stuff.
You betcha. That's Ritch Winter, the business of sports, every Wednesday here on Sports 1440.